Good day and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for Introduction to Healthcare Dashboards with Power BI. My name is Russell Hendrickson. I'm the CEO with Practical Data Solutions. And today I've also got joining me Jarod Teixeira, who's a report analyst with us, who's going to show and guide us through how to build some charts.
Yep, thank you for joining us today.
And Jarod, you're relatively new with Power BI, which is kind of fun because that's what our topic today is, Introduction to Power BI. So I understand you're going to show everybody here a couple different chart types that they can build.
Yeah, some easy chart types to take your data and make it a little bit more visual.
Excellent. So we'll go through where to get started and how to get started, and then we'll even talk about a little more complex data modeling that can make your Power BI really sing and shine. So with that, let's jump right in. For those of you who aren't familiar with PDS, we specialize in healthcare reporting, specifically around operational analytics, clinical analytics, and financial analytics. And we'll talk a little bit more about how PDS's different services can really make Power BI shine. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Throughout the webinar today, please feel free to chat in your questions using the Zoom toolbar, and we'll be happy to answer your questions live during the webinar as we go along. So feel free to chat them in at any time. So Power BI, it's a tremendously powerful tool that when designed and built out can really communicate what's going on in your healthcare organization, allowing you to slice and dice through data, present information at different levels, make it easy for users to just point and click and see visual trends and how things are changing and really explore data. We can build out through the Power BI app different panels within our dashboards that cover different subject areas, moving from financial analytics over to utilization type data, even getting down to sort of panel sizes and where our patients are coming from, even doing things like geographics and mapping. Power BI and Microsoft have really put together, an exciting way to make data both interesting and visual. And so, as we think about these different visuals and the different ways they can really drive performance, we've got this great tool. Where do we start? How do we get started with Power BI? So if we're going to talk about data visualization and analytics, we really have to think about what's the purpose of analytics. And the purpose of analytics is to support performance improvement. It's about empowering users with understanding what's going on in their organization. And if we're going to improve performance in healthcare, we have to think about those sort of key pillars: the patient experience, operations, financial, clinical, even our staffing and employees. Leadership has to understand to make visual analytics powerful and usable and really drive some value to the organization. We have to think about these pillars. So I have to talk about being data driven, right? And although that word is overused, I've even heard it used like data driven AI now. The key to being data driven is using data continuously. We're focused on using data, real facts, understanding what's going on to uncover our opportunities and highlight those performance gaps, those areas of potential that we can improve, and then using our data and our leadership skills to drive better performance, again, being data driven, leveraging data and insights that only analytics can drive. Visual dashboards have gotten really powerful today. They support better decisions. They make it easier to spot trends in just about every major software vendor, from Microsoft with Power BI that we're going to talk about today, to companies like Tableau, MicroStrategy, IBM with their Cognos product. Oracle has a host of analytics tools. And of course, Qlik is another one of the major tools that we see in the healthcare market. Ultimately, though, without thinking about performance and leadership, these are just tools, and without being able to apply and use them correctly, they don't really help get us to where we want to go. Why specifically are we talking about Power BI? Microsoft, a major player in the market. They're delivering Power BI. They've made it very cost effective for users to try to drive performance, build out the tools, start designing dashboards. It's fairly easy to adopt if you're comfortable with working with Excel, and it plugs into all the major sort of both Microsoft and non-Microsoft databases. So it's very easy to get started, and they made it easy for you as a user to just click on your screen and start working with the free version, or you can get into a very simple, subscription model for yourself that can be expanded to run through the organization. Many organizations do physician level dashboarding to help physicians understand what's going on, their trends in their performance, allowing them to understand their productivity or even their goals for compensation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So being able to build out visualizations and then being able to just, publish them so your different physicians, care teams, and users have access to understand their performance, ultimately with even being able to bring in benchmarks and targets and budgets so we can understand how are we performing. This is really what we're trying to do with Power BI. And we're going to explore today how you can get started using Power BI. And if you're working with Excel, how you're going to migrate over to that. I do want everybody to keep in mind when we think about applying analytics, there's different levels and ways that we can look at reports. We can look at what happened by summarizing data or doing trend analysis, but we really need to think about benchmarking, like we just spoke about, benchmarking, budgeting, and targeting. If we're going to understand where the performance gaps are in our practice or in our health system or in our hospital, we need to understand where those gaps are so we can predict if we can move the needle, if it can increase our utilization, our scheduling, or our patient access. We can start to project the impact on patient experience. We can start to understand the impact on how many more patients we can get through and improve care. We can even understand the financial impact, whether it's lowering expenses or raising revenue. So as we go through and we start talking about different things, it's key that we can both understand and predict outcomes, but we also then need to be able to communicate those outcomes. Study after study has shown the more employees understand their goals, their performance, and how they can impact closing those performance gaps, it drives better outcomes. Not only does it drive better outcomes, but it also makes the employees feel more engaged in the process. And that's been shown to improve the patient experience. So it's kind of interesting. Just by improving how we work with analytics and sharing information and gaining transparency into the challenges and the goals we have as an organization, we're really better engaging employees, which ultimately has a direct impact on patient satisfaction. So that's kind of a neat side benefit of having better data-driven organization and using analytics to move you forward. So how do we get started with Power BI? And the number one area that we would recommend always is if you're not working with Power BI, you don't have an existing data warehouse, start by leveraging Excel. You can import existing workbooks and data sheets right into Power BI and start understanding how you can leverage Power BI's capabilities. It's very similar to Excel. Even working on this webinar, there was a couple things that as we were trying to explain how to show, right away said, oh, it works that way in Excel. We can see it works that same way in Power BI because Microsoft has brought that similar feel to the tool. And then, of course, as we design dashboards, we want to test them with users. So it's a great way to say if you're already doing something in Excel, you can improve it and really gain acceptance to it. And then, of course, think about scaling. But Excel is definitely the place to start. So what we're looking on the screen is an Excel dashboard where this was built out. So we have different slicers and we're communicating, revenue against budget, revenue and expenses, and really trying to understand even some of the performance with some of the different payers within our organization, right? Jarod, this is a dashboard that you've worked on, and we actually featured in one of our other webinars recently about building some of the different chart types.
Yeah, we worked on the tree map and also working on the slicer, which I think is really unique for this dashboard here.
Yeah, and so that slicer is a perfect example of, building that functionality into Excel. But imagine if instead of needing to build out the slicer and sort of the key steps to the slicer, imagine there's the same dashboard. It's built out in Power BI. It almost looks identical. And one of the key functions in Power BI is the fact that, there's slicers or filters readily available through the data set. So, this is one of the advantages of if we build the same dashboard in Power BI, as you can see, they look almost identical. You almost can't tell that I switched, right, from Excel to Power BI. So if you would, Jarod, take us through loading the data from that Excel sheet into Power BI so we can create the same report that you've seen in Excel into Power BI.
Yeah, so we're going to start with all of our data in Excel in the sheet here, and then we're going to open up Power BI, and I'm using the desktop version here. We're going to click on blank report. Then we're going to click on import data from Excel. Then we're going to click on our data sheet, open that. Then we want to make sure we click on the sheet that has our data in it, which is this revenue and expense sheet, and click load. And then we click on this arrow over here, and then we should see all of our columns from our data sheet into Power BI.
Excellent. Now, as you can see, pretty straightforward. It seems to have brought in our data, but I know, Jarod, just like when we load data into Excel, sometimes we have to tell it about like our different time dimensions. So what do we have to do to correct this data set?
We have to correct our month column. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go into model view. We're going to find our month column. And then under data type, instead of a whole number, we're going to change it to date. And then we can say refresh now. Then we could go back to our report view.
And if you would, I want to validate some data. I want to make sure that we've got everything working. Would you just create a simple crosstab so everybody can see how we can work with the data now?
Yeah, so if we add in divisions, we can add payments, gross charges, and we got visits. And then we can expand this so we can see all of our columns.
Excellent. Now that we've got the data loaded, Jarod's going to show us how to create the bar chart, the clustered column chart on the top left of the screen. We're going to add the columns that are required, pick the current month filter, adjust the spacing, and then remove unnecessary items and really format that out. So if you would, Jarod, walk us through these key steps step by step, and we'll get this first chart built out in Power BI.
Yeah, so we go back to our other report in Power BI. We're going to click on this clustered column chart here. And then the columns that we're going to use is going to be net revenue, budget net revenue, and then we're going to do year-to-date, year-to-date net revenue, and year-to-date budget net revenue. And then on this filters, we're going to add the current month flag here, and then we're just going to check the current month. So that way we have our year-to-date and our current month on the same chart. Now in this, we can go to data labels, we turn those on, and we want to format these. We're going to display the units in the thousands. Then we go over to columns, we go to layout. We want to space between categories 0 and space between series, we're going to 25%. And then from here, we can remove this legend up top by just clicking this. The y-axis, we're going to remove those values and the title. And then from here, you just format some of the colors, change your title, and you could add a x-axis title down here describing what these bars are for. And then it should look something like this.
That was great, Jarod. The second chart now we're going to teach you how to create is the scatter chart. And to create the scatter chart, we're going to pretty much follow the same steps. We're going to add the columns that are required. We're going to increase the marker size. Really, the rest of it is just removing things that aren't needed and formatting it to make it visual with the right colors and the way you want it to present in your dashboard. If you would, Jarod, why don't you walk us building that bottom middle one, revenue and expense per visit? What do we call that? A bubble chart?
Yes, our scatter or XY chart. So we're going to go back to our other report. Can move this chart over. And then we're going to click on scatter chart. And the columns we're going to use here, we're going to go to revenue per visit, expense per visit, and then we want payer name. We want to make sure that the payer name is the legend. And then similar to the last chart, we're just going to remove the legend. You can go to markers, increase the size, and then you can adjust the colors, change the title, and there's some final formatting. And then that chart should look something like this once you change the colors, add your access titles and your main title up here.
So as you can see, we showed you how to build two of the charts here. The rest of the charts can be built out using the same, approach. Obviously, some of this is dependent upon your data. Jarod, you've been working now, both with Excel here and Power BI, for a few months. Any comments on this dashboard?
I like how easy it is to work with the slicer in Power BI. In Excel, it takes some extra steps, but in Power BI, it's a feature that's right there, so it's easy to use.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why we're showing this. What's interesting is this same dashboard. We do have a webinar available online where we actually show you how to build out the tree map and build this dashboard and some of the different slicers. So, if you're interested in learning how to do that in Excel, not ready for Power BI, please check out our other webinar that's available around that topic. Why are we doing this dashboard though? I got to go back to where we started, right? The value of this dashboard is to empower users to monitor expenses against budget, to understand their performance. This is the kind of dashboard we want all the division or department leaders to be able to look at no less than monthly. Are we on track with the last closed month when we posted revenue and expenses? Are we on track target to hit our goals for the year? Right? We want to be able to understand and spot variations. We want to be able to understand and spot if our performance isn't on track so we can start making corrective actions before we get to our year end. And then, of course, some of the key metrics in this dashboard, if your organization is, leveraging RVUs, hopefully for payer and performance, understanding is your cost per RVU climbing or your revenue declining per RVU across different departments or providers? And if so, you want to be able to take action quickly. This dashboard really allows, if I'm an executive, to drive accountability with managers and within their service lines, making sure that everybody is closely managing their revenue and their expenses to budget, and we understand if we're not going to get to where we want to go. So a really powerful tool and just a great example of a focused dashboard to help drive performance. And that's what we're trying to do with this data and analytics. Here's a newer chart that we showed in our recent Excel webinar. And this uses slicers as well, Jarod. And we're looking at different cycle time data that, measuring from the time the patient checked in and the different areas through their visit to when they actually checked out.
Yeah, this is the jitter chart that we showed in our Excel webinar.
Yeah, what I think is kind of fun, as you mentioned, this jitter where it's jittering the different cycle times, but it allows you to see kind of the main concentration and then the outliers. So it's an alternative to using something like the box and whisker chart. Really useful, especially if you're trying to understand total cycle times and if your focus is trying to improve or leverage down the amount of time that patients are spending in clinic. We can look at the same dashboard and the same data set, having moved it from Excel over into Power BI. Jarod, though, I notice at the bottom of my screen, my metrics, they look a little different. What's going on down there?
Yeah, just with the way some of our data is laid out in Excel and the way that Power BI looks at it, we had to adjust the way that table is laid out, but it's the same data.
Yeah. So we've got the same metrics, but instead of the metrics running down the page, they're running across, right? Which is measuring the different times from check-in to when they were seen by the provider or when they left the practice or the facility. So, just another example of how you can move data you've staged in Excel and even do the same chart types, in this case, using something a little more advanced like the jitter chart. Another example, many organizations are still doing physician compensation reporting using Excel. And so, although you can do nice visualizations in Excel around comp and show physicians or providers how they're performing, whether it's their RVUs, how much they've earned against draws, right? These same types of reports that are built out in Excel can be designed to, and converted to be published in Power BI, where now we might have slices across the data or be able to even think about distributing them more electronically, so that if I'm a department or a division manager, I can start doing comparisons or even meet with the physicians and show them their data. So if you're doing things in Excel, it's fairly easy to try to migrate over into Power BI, at least as a starting point. So why wouldn't we just do everything from Excel and into Power BI, right? It's easy to do. As you've seen, you can oftentimes migrate dashboards in minutes or hours. Slicer is much easier to work with, and you can kind of go, look, I've done something. I have something to show you today. But there's a lot of downsides if you want to do that. And some of the biggest is that if the users need more access to data, we're going to be limited because we're building these dashboards off spreadsheets. We don't have that slice and dice capability. Also, if we're manually putting data into Excel, like we might be with comp, and we don't automate that in some fashion, a lot of our entries could have mistakes coming into Power BI, which means we're really replicating those mistakes. Making changes can be challenging, especially if we've got to add columns or we're doing a lot of custom work in Excel. And scalability is the big one. So as easy as it is to get started with Power BI, we need to really talk about using data analytics and what users really want in terms of how should we be proceeding to make our analytics more robust to support the organization. Do we just want to present a picture, even if we can slice through that data? Or do we really want to give users what we like to call the trio of analytics: visualization capabilities, slice and dice, and then detailed reporting that allows them to get all the way down to the procedure level? So let's take a look at how, when we use our visualizations, if they're modeled correctly, we can deliver all of that through the tools within Power BI. So to look at this expanded usage of analytics where we're really giving users all different levels of data, let's go back into our visualization. And as we've shown, it's easy to deliver visualizations that have slicers and different levels of data. I can do that with Excel. I can do that with staged modeling and make it easy for the users to explore data. But what I want to be able to do, and I can do this if I've staged my dashboards correctly, leveraging data models. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So from here, I can just give the users the ability to drill right into the data and continue exploring that data. So as you can see, I've now moved from the visualization into my tabular data, which is like a cube or a pivot table, and I can continue to select different filters. Maybe I want to look at, all the charges done in Q4 of last year. I can also continue to slice and dice through my departments, and I could have other slicers as I want to explore the data. At this point, then, if I want to go beyond just summary data, I can even just click and drill all the way through. So I can move and say, I just want to see this one physician and I want to see all the detailed procedures they're doing by patient. By drilling through, now I'm down actually at the patient level detail. You can see I've got charges, I've got procedures, I've got different payer information. And I can continue to slice and dice and filter through and add different dimensions to my data source. Maybe I want to bring in what was the primary diagnosis on each row associated to that procedure. So it's fairly easy that within the tools, I can continue to explore the data, just grab the diagnosis code I want, place it where I want it in the report. And as you can see now I'm not just looking at what procedures we did and the associated charges or RVUs, but I can even see the diagnoses. That's the kind of capability that we want to give our users. So the key to being able to do what we just showed, to be able to give users that slice and dice and drill capability, is in dimensional modeling, or data modeling as it's often called. We need to use things like the star schema or snowflake modeling designs in our database that make it easier to then deliver to the users the kind of functionality that they're looking for. Without getting too deep into this, this is a typical architecture you might see, and certainly things that we do all the time here at PDS, which is moving from your billing system or your EHR, whether it's Epic or Cerner or eClinicalWorks, NextGen, it really doesn't matter what applications we're working with. Moving that data through and then restructuring that data into one of these star schema optimized models. And when we do that, then we can really unlock the Power BI, because it loves the star schema. I don't know how else to say that, right? It's designed to handle modeled data, which gives us that capability. Ultimately, what that means then is when we deliver those dashboards to users, we can give them not just the visuals that you've seen that are communicating those performance gaps, we give them the ability to slice and dice and drill through into the detail of the data. If we don't model, if we just shortcut everything, or if we try to go directly from Power BI right into our EHR, although you can do it, and the EHRs are getting better at delivering sort of views into their data, it's often fairly complex. You may have multiple tables in your EHR that you don't know which one to use, and it's a little bit hard to trust that you're actually getting the data you think you are. You're probably limited on drill down. It's going to be hard to blend different data sets from different applications if we want to blend that budget and expense data with our financial data. And then as changes come, or as we want to try to expand our data models, they're just not designed to work in conjunction with each other. And even oftentimes, you're not going to have the automation. So each month, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to refresh or update these models. If we don't deliver users what they need, though, in the long run, they're going to get really frustrated when they start to question, is my comp reporting correct? Why am I only getting credit for these RVUs? If they don't have the detail behind it, they're going to be frustrated. And that oftentimes leads to challenges where people start not to trust the data, even though the reports may be visual, they might be correct. But if users can't validate what's underneath, oftentimes they struggle. How do we move from where we are, though? Because you might be saying, well, we don't have a data warehouse. I don't have SQL modeling skills, right? And so there's several things you need to think about. Is your organization growing? What's the structure? If you have, potentially an IT department, do they have the time to focus, and do they have the expertise? Do they even understand data modeling? Do we have some core goals and objectives? Are we trying to improve cycle times? Are we trying to increase patient access? Are we looking to expand and even potentially open more clinics, giving better access to patients in unserved areas, right? What do we have for tools, infrastructure? And ultimately, are we growing, and are we trying to scale up? Because many organizations right now are growing very quickly with mergers and acquisitions. And even one of the big things, does it make sense to build ourselves, or should we even consider outsourcing or working with a partner like PDS who could help you get there quickly because of their experience? No matter what we're trying to do, we always have to come back to what are the questions we're trying to answer? What are the areas of our business we're trying to grow? And who are the different users, and what types of data do they need access to? We may want physicians to have visual dashboards that understand their comp, but if I work in billing or collections, I definitely need to be able to drill all the way down to detail and understand how long has an invoice been open? Was it denied? Who's responsible for it? And why, and what do we need to do to get that paid? PDS has a tremendous amount of experience over 25 years modeling out data and it makes it just so easy to work with Power BI. I've talked about a few of the benefits, but it makes it easy to refresh data, automate data, even when you're slicing and dicing through data. If your data isn't structured correctly, it's not going to be fast. It may be slow, and your users are going to be sitting there waiting for refresh. So through our different data modeling, we can make it easy to integrate and really design a structure that is scalable, whether you're using Power BI or at some point you even want to use some of the newer technologies that are coming with this data-driven AI. We have a host of best practice models that cover different areas, from revenue cycle data sets to looking at patient risk scores, physician compensation, quality metrics, RVUs. So we have a number of plug and play models that we can customize and bring into your organization and help you unlock the Power BI. To help you summarize some of this, what are the keys to success with Power BI? First thing I would say is, if you're not working with it, start with what you have. Leverage some of your Excel workbooks. It's a great place to sort of play around with Power BI, get your hands into the tool, and start learning some of the basics like we've shown you here today. Keep in mind, when you design dashboards, make them actionable. Help users not only understand where have we been, but where are we headed. And if you can highlight and identify performance gaps, make sure you call them out in your dashboards. Make that the main area of focus. Always with dashboards, make sure the users, the people who are going to be looking at them, are giving you feedback as you design. We've found dashboard iterations take 3 to 5 times when you bring out a new dashboard. Feedback is great and helps you keep focused on what we're trying to communicate. Do think about modeling, right? If you jump into Power BI and you do everything in Excel, that at some point, if your organization is growing, is going to create challenges. So you do have to think about a long-term strategy that involves data modeling. And then, of course, plan for growth, right? There's nothing more frustrating than you start delivering dashboards and the organization grows and then you can't keep up. So you do want to think about that as you're working through your strategy and working with the tools. We'd like to challenge you. How does your current analytics stack up? Do users have access to the metrics that they need? Can leadership clearly see the gaps and opportunities, and do the dashboards focus around your current strategic initiatives? Do physicians and staff have the information they need, understanding their performance and how they can impact it? And then, are your dashboards automated? Is it easy to click a button and have users get the information they need, so you've got both transparency and engagement within your organization? At this point, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have about anything we talked about or any of the services that we offer. Just use the Q&A toolbar below. Chat in your questions. We'll be happy to take them. You can also get more information from our website, www.pds-online.com. Feel free to email in to us, solutions@pds-online.com as well. And of course, we have a whole bunch of different videos related to Excel training, more around data modeling, up on our YouTube channel. So please, by any means, if we can be of assistance, please reach out.
Thank you for attending today.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.